Hello. Thank you very much for attending our FastCast regarding inspections. My name is Jeff Thompson. I'm co-founder and CEO of Aware Manager. I have with me Tommy Gunn. He's the former head of global real estate for Philips, and he works with Aware Manager as a strategic advisor. And also working with us today is Hannah Silva here at Aware Manager, who's going to help us out with the Q&A at the end of the session. Speaking about the Q&A, as we go through the content of the webinar, please use the chat panel in the lower right corner to ask questions. If we're able to address the questions as we go, we'll address them along the way, but we will also address the listed questions at the end. If there are any questions we can't get to in the allotted time, we'll be sure to get back to you if you include your contact information along with the question that you ask. So just to talk briefly about the agenda, and then I'll hand it over to Tommy. We're going to start off with just a definition of inspections. It's always useful to just start there as a jumping off point. And then the fact that inspections are more prevalent than you'd think. They show up throughout the world, really. And then Tommy's going to relate a story about how important inspections can be on a personal level, and also where inspections fit into the foundation of a great FM program. And along with that, how they lead to metrics that you can use to make decisions, and then basically put it into context from a technological standpoint, talking about the way that inspections have evolved over time. So with that, I'll hand it off to Tommy, and we'll go from there.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for attending. I found this form. I think I was on mute there for a minute. Let me start again. An inspection is most generally an organized examination or formal evaluation exercise. In engineering activities, inspections involve measurements, tests, gauges, and they're applied to certain characteristics in regard to to an object or activity. Inspections are usually non-destructive. They may be visual, or they may involve sensing technologies such as ultrasonic testing accompanied but with direct physical presence, or remotely such as remote visual inspections, or manually or automatically such as automated optical inspections. The definition is a formal one I took from an organization, but we'll get into more really some of the more practical applications as we go forward. Essentially, inspections are everywhere. When I started to think about it in our general daily life, although inspections to me were things that started early in my career with formalized rounds, when we take a look at all the applications of inspections, they're certainly in the health area of our food preparation. We take a look at the general infrastructure of bridges and roads today, and all of the other applications that we have of inspections. Really, they're everywhere in our life. I remember a story that my dad told me many years ago, and although it didn't hit me that it was a formalized inspection, it certainly was applicable to inspections and to his life. My dad was an airline pilot during World War II, and every time before they flew a mission, they had a gentleman, a flight crew chief, that went out and did an inspection of their airplane. The pilot and co-pilot had essentially a large metal sheet that was put under their seat, and that was there to protect them in case of any flak or enemy fire that they would have during their mission. This particular day, my dad was leaving from England, and the inspection came out. They took a look at the pilot and co-pilot seat, and in fact, the metal sheet was there, so he okayed it. My dad and the co-pilot got in, and they removed their metal sheet that day, primarily because it was uncomfortable for a long mission. Fortunately, the flight crew chief went back and double-checked them and found that they had removed it and put the plates back in both the pilot and co-pilot's seat. That day, they flew their mission, and on their return, they were actually hit by enemy fire. And if it hadn't, that plate had not been put back in, there would have been probably the loss of the aircraft. and I wouldn't be sitting here telling you the story. So inspections do hit a personal level. Why inspections are so important? When we take a look at inspections, some of the areas are, inspection programs should really be designed around your strategic objectives. You need to ask yourself the following questions when you design an inspection program. Inspection program isn't put together just for the sake of doing it, but it has a very significant purpose. Do our facilities provide a safe and comfortable environment that fosters productivity for employees? Now, that may be a large statement, but some of the very simplistic things that we do when designing an inspection program are around those exact deliverables. Is the temperature comfortable for our employees? Is the trash emptied? Are all of the other aspects of their day-to-day activities ready so that when they come to work, they'll be in the most productive world? Are we able to adjust our service model with spikes in customer service requests? Using collected metrics, we can take and cater our inspection program to make certain that we're looking at the right things. Are staffing numbers adequate to meet customer work order volume? Are facility costs in line to achieve the best value, both operational and capital? And are facility programs designed to perform optimal energy performance? Answers to these questions will help design the goals with your inspection program, crafted to provide the metrics and help answer those very specific questions. So beyond the equipment, we start to take a look at what inspections provide us and all of the data that they provide, some of the aspects of metrics that we collect, and we collect a lot of metrics. But what you should be doing is taking these metrics and using them to design the specific program. Not all metrics are going to be important. They're really going to be based on your strategic plan and what your goals and objectives for your customer are. Some examples, and this is just an example. Preventative maintenance baseline we took from one of our customers here. Certainly there are so many metrics that we go by, but in this particular example, we're taking a look at the heavy data volume by specific shop. In this particular case, this particular client was looking for work volume by shop. So that can be a part of your design. Again, it's what those metrics mean specifically to your objectives in your area.
And just a note about this too, one of the things that a lot of people find value in is combining maintenance data along with not only inspections data, but also customer surveys and bringing them all together into one place to build metrics that can help you make decisions or can help highlight a problem. So it's great to be in a facility where all the preventive maintenance is being done on time, but you can really add context to your reporting and to your decision making if you also bring in inspection results as well as survey data for occupants of the space. So you can get all three of those into one place and leverage into your dashboarding and visualization. It can really allow you to focus on things before they become a major problem. And inspections, if inspections occur in a vacuum, they really aren't going to do nearly as much good as they will if they're connected to the rest of the information in your environment. And this is true across stakeholders, by the way, not only within one organization, but across all the stakeholders in the facility. Getting it all into one place can be really valuable.
So to Jeff's point, these charts, the specifics are not really what's important. What's really important here is that the metrics that we collect help us run our business. Those metrics that we take, what we try to do here and what we recommend is that you create a dashboard. For me, every time or every morning when I arrive at work in an operational role, one of the things I would want to do is start my computer, and based on what my needs were, I would have a dashboard in front of me that were the key aspects of where the status of my business was every morning. And that status could change depending on the account or where I was. But I would want to know if I had open work orders that were coming due or past due. I might want to know if there were any environmental issues. Again, my dashboard and the metrics I used to support that were designed around the strategic and regular objectives that I had for a particular customer. Metrics can be confused with targets and drive the wrong behavior. Instead, what we really need to be able to do is manage by exception, relying on automatic alerts when critical areas of the operation aren't hitting performance targets. And once again, that would be where my dashboard would be. Every morning I would want to know where those critical areas were. Certainly as I drill down into the work during the day, I'd want to see the type of work that was completed. But the first thing every day I would always want to see where those items were that potentially were going to cause a goal, cause a problem with me hitting a goal. And again, if you remember from slide 7, we need to make sure that these are aligned with our goals and objectives. So today, as we've seen the evolution, I guess you could say I'm fortunate enough that my start in the industry was in the late 60s. So I have seen quite a change of how we use information, how we collect that information, how we perform inspections. One of the key things that we have today certainly takes a look at metrics and how we extract those. Remember that in most cases there are hundreds of pieces of information that we get, and they are not targeted. We have to make sure that they're targeted against our goals and objectives. Today we have the major benefits of mobile. We have significantly faster response time. Probably one of the key aspects of it is that we have real-time data collection, stronger transparency, and again, you can be more proactive. If we're in the field and we find a problem, in the past you might have to take and either call in or report it at the end of the day. Today, if a major problem is found, it can be transmitted almost immediately.
Just speaking of that too, like one of the things that's really valuable now in most mobile inspections tracking programs is that you can have triggers associated with readings that are outside of acceptable ranges. So certainly, if we go back to some of the very early inspections that we had done on mobile, there might only be 3 options. If it was a risk management round, you might have no unsafe condition found as one option, unsafe condition found and fixed, or work required, and then somebody would sort of type in, what it is that needed to be done. Now what you can do is the inspections can carry a lot more of the logic with them. So specific failures on an inspection can initiate requests to address the issue before the person doing the inspection even returns from the field. So you can really communicate information much faster. So it's not just response time when you find that something's out of range on an inspection. That actual indication that something's out of range is occurring right at the point it's seen. And that can make a huge difference in your ability to address it before it becomes an issue, particularly a safety issue or even just a comfort and convenience issue for a building occupant. If you connect these things together in such a way that your inspections are driving activity, that can really save you a lot of grief, and it can also make it more likely that you'll meet your SLAs. The other big thing too is that mobile devices have evolved now to the point where they're mobile sensors in a variety of ways. You have location tracking, so now you can actually have data about the location of the device embedded in the same record as the information that's being recorded by the inspector. You can get from the device, you can get out to additional supporting information. So there's quite a bit to this. And also, I wanted to mention it here, but it might come up again later. When you're tailoring these inspection programs, one of the things that's important to bear in mind is that every organization has a certain culture associated with it, and they want to focus on certain things and have flexibility. We've done a number of inspection regimens for rounds, and in some facilities, they want to be able to see the history of what readings were taken, maybe over the last 4 hours or over the last 12 hours, They want to see that history leading up to the reading that they're about to take, whether it's steam pressure or some other value. In other organizations doing exactly the same work, they actually want to shield that information for the person doing the inspection because they don't want to, they don't want to bias them towards putting in a particular value, or they don't want to show the acceptable threshold in that environment because they're worried that that might drive somebody to put in, a non-accurate value. So those are all the things that need to be incorporated into your inspections regimen and how you instantiate those inspections into whatever technology you use. It really isn't a one-size-fits-all. It really has to be tailored to what your goals are.
So when we think about the use of handheld and mobile technology, when we reflect back over where technology has been, certainly since my time in my career in facilities, I can go back to the time when everything was extremely paper intensive. Some people may remember that we would have a centralized call center. If you had a problem that you had was called into the call center, they would have to reach out to you. You had a beeper. And this was back in the time when we had pay phones. We'd have to stop on the side of the road, call in, get our work order. And certainly we've seen that evolution start with paper started to leave us for our inspections and rounds. We went to what I'll call dumb devices initially. They were essentially nothing more than the paper documents, but they were in electronic format and a handheld device. And we saw that evolve now to where in the last 8 years we have an interactive capability for our handheld devices when we're conducting inspections, to where we are now with smart building technology. It's just amazing to me that some of the technology in the field today, we're able to take and feed that information to us rather than us having to go take and visually inspect that. We get the data real time, and it's usually communicating to us the information prior to a problem or a customer being impacted in some form of whether it be temperature too hot, temperature too cold. I was amazed recently. I attended a building symposium in one of the major venues in New York City, and I was quite surprised, given our industry, that there were a number of items in this particular venue that were off. There were lights out. There were paper products had expired. All kinds of things that we as facilities professionals would be constantly taking a look at in an inspection process to catch. Today, all of those things could have been caught proactively with a communication to the smart device that said, you have a light out, you're running low on paper supplies, etc. And it really begs the question of where will we be in 5 years with technology. I kind of see there's going to be a major change in how humans interact with the inspection process and how we start to evolve to even a more technologically advanced process. But there'll always be a place for humans in the process. This particular slide here is probably, in my mind, is the most important slide that I'll present today. It really says that an inspection, a good, successful inspection program relies on the development of rigor and follow a formalized process. The challenge that we all have as facilities professionals is the human element, is to overcome what, I don't know if I coined this term or we made it up one day, but it's called repeat blindness. It's essentially defined as seeing a deficiency which after going uncorrected begins to blend into the normal landscape and eventually is seen as normal and an acceptable condition. Certainly as I evolved through my career into more senior roles, I found that the times I would go to the field and conduct inspections my way, it was just astonishing to me that the number of deficiencies that I could find. And when I would challenge my teams on it wasn't that necessarily that they hadn't seen it. You know, sometimes we don't have the appropriate resources, both financially and time-wise, to address some of these. And when that happens, again, it starts to blend into the landscape and become the normal process. And we have to continually go after that. We have to have a rigid process that must be followed consistently to ensure success. I'll share one last very personal story to me that happened very recently. In early March, we had a major snowstorm in the area where I live, and a home near us caught fire. And unfortunately, the home burned to the ground, and it was a fire that went on for 6 hours. In that time frame, we live in a very rural community. The only water source is from a small pond near where this fire was. So there were 14 fire trucks that kept going around in a circle, and they were collecting water out of the pond. Over the course of my life, for some reason, I have a process every morning where I check the water pressure coming into my house. I check my boiler and make sure the pressures are all correct. And the following morning after the fire, I noticed that my water pressure was starting to drop. So I started recording that like a good building person would and tracked that every hour for the next 3 days until my water pressure got to 3 pounds. And it turned out that, and I used that information and forwarded it to the water district, and it turned out that the fire trucks going round and round and round had actually crushed one of the water supply pipes that were leading down the street that served 7 homes. So a personalized story, but that was that rigid process I went through every single day collecting that information. Suggestion to help overcome the issue is that working in teams or swapping with teammates from other groups brings in a fresh, clean set of eyes to the inspection process. One thing that I have done successfully in my career is that I would rotate facilities professionals out of their normal environment to a peers environment and vice versa, and that allowed them to essentially bring in a fresh set of eyes that they could work together on in a threatening format to help improve the process. With that, I will turn it back over to Jeff.
Just as you were mentioning that, there was one sort of anecdote that came up in one of the high-rise buildings in New York that I think is relevant. So they're doing rounds. They do 12-hour shifts of many different data collection points throughout the facility. So for one of the engineering rounds that they do, there's 2 sets of people that do it, and one group. There are 2 guys, fairly young. They do the inspections. Basically, they start in the middle of the building. One of them goes to the top. One of them goes to the bottom. They sort of work their way down or up, respectively, and then it's almost a competition for them to get to the point where they've done the entire building. And they're visiting every piece of equipment and they're recording values as they go. And then as they're recording those values, it's triggering any sort of warnings that need to be done and all the rest of it. On another shift, they'll have a chief engineer or an assistant chief. And basically what they're doing, they're using the same mobile device, but they're just logging the stuff off the head end of the BMS program, and they're not visiting the pieces of equipment. So you've got 2 very different things, going on. You've got one set of data that's being taken directly by somebody looking at it. You've got another set of data that's coming off of the BMS program. Now, in theory, those values should be the same. But what's interesting is they never are. What they find is that the analog meters that are on the pieces of equipment actually are recording slightly different values than the BMS system is recording. And so what they've needed to do now is they've needed to tailor their inspections to indicate whether it was a visual inspection or whether it was a remote inspection done, taking the data off the head end. And I think what's going to happen over time is things are going to become more and more sensitive to whether you're taking the data by putting someone in place to see it, or if you're just taking a value that's coming in from outside. And I think there's advantages to both. I think there's a tremendous amount of power available. I mean, everybody hears about IoT all the time in facilities management now, because every device that you connect to a facility has the ability to throw off data. And every BMS program is evolving, more and more ways to connect more deeply to all the equipment in the facility. So you're really swimming in this sea of information. But there's still value in having a set of inspections out there where someone is visually checking what's going on and comparing the visual inspection to the data you're getting back electronically. And it's almost an extra dimension to the data that people are receiving, because you might be getting a value. Let's say you're getting a dropping value coming back off of a BMS system. If you actually don't go and see it, there may or may not be a puddle of water building up on the floor underneath a piece of equipment, which accounts for the drop in pressure, or it might be something else that's going on. So I think that having that mix as time goes on, I think it's a risk. I wouldn't say it's a danger, but it's a minor risk that people come to rely so heavily on remote sensing that they may lose sight of the value of putting people out in the field to do those inspections. And so getting transparency into that in terms of identifying, where someone was when they recorded the value, or was this a visual inspection or was it a remote inspection using IoT, I think those sorts of things are going to become more and more important over time as people are trying to use inspection data. So let's take a look at questions we have so far.
Thank you, Tommy and Jeff. So we do have a couple of questions here. One of them is, do you find that inspection results are readily available from outside contractors or facility managers?
Actually, more so now. I think that over time it's becoming more and more common for basically the primary stakeholder in a facility, either the owner or manager, or even the FN. People are starting to demand more and more transparency into the data being gathered by all the stakeholders in the facility. One of the things that we believe pretty firmly is that if you have somebody doing work on your behalf, the data that's generated from that activity should belong to you, and it should belong to you as soon as it's created. So I think that over time it's becoming more and more of a standard that inspections data is not being siloed or being held by the person doing the inspection and then summarized and then delivered. I think that used to be the case. You'd have somebody go out into the field to do an inspection. That would then be summarized and compressed down into a report, and then that report would go back to a stakeholder. I think now a lot of the lag time is being squeezed out of that process because people demand the transparency so that systems can trigger warnings when there's a fail on an inspection, or they can have dashboards that incorporate current inspections into their view. That empowers them to address things more quickly or to spot a dangerous trend before it becomes a major issue. And we've run into some people that they're a little bit reluctant to provide that transparency, but over time, and actually pretty quickly, what people begin to realize is that transparency is tremendously valuable even to the people doing the inspection, because it actually allows them to do things in a more effective way. So, instead of, if you can get a heads up that an SLA is going to be blown long before you reach a threshold, that's incredibly valuable to you. Where if you're waiting for a weekly or monthly report, you may miss that. It might have already, you might have missed your opportunity to address it before it becomes a contract issue. So we're finding that transparency can be really valuable.
Thanks, Jeff. So we have a couple of questions coming in, and we're running up on time right now, so if we don't get to your questions, we'll contact you via email. So we do have one about budget restrictions. The question is, due to budget restrictions, how do you effectively set an inspections program in place when there is a chance that an issue is not addressed for at least 1 to 2 years?
So there's kind of two pieces to this. If something fails in inspection, I think this speaks a little bit to the point Tommy made about repeat blindness, and that if you're doing an inspection and there's a failure, or if there's an unsafe condition, or something that just doesn't meet a particular standard, I think you have to prioritize it in the sense that if it's a fire and life safety issue, or if it's a liability issue or a reputational risk issue, or even things like doing spot checks on credentialing of subcontractors and things like that, all of those sorts of inspections, there are definitely going to be categories that can't wait 1 to 2 years. There's just no way. If there's something that can't be addressed, a great way to approach it is to identify it and defer it and say, we made this inspection, something failed inspection. but we have a plan for addressing it, and here's the plan we have, and here's its delivery date. There's a huge difference in terms of, let's call it reputational risk. If something comes up and you haven't addressed something, first of all, you need to demonstrate that you were aware of it. I think that's critical. And I think you have to demonstrate that you have a plan to address it. If you're unable to address it because of budget, that helps you, the fact that you have a plan helps you, identify that you may need a larger budget. Or if you can't do it, at least you've covered yourself in the sense that if something happens and you know that it's there, you can't be accused of turning a blind eye to it. I think that there are definitely categories, though, that when they come up in an inspection, particularly if it has anything to do with safety, it has to be fast-tracked. And I think that it's just prudent to make sure that the fire and life safety issues are tackled first. Some other things, maybe they're appearance issues or maybe they're less critical. I think just identifying them and making sure that they don't get lost is really the critical thing. As Tony mentioned, if you do an inspection and you see something fail every day, at some point, if you're not recording that it's out of range, even when the budget does come up and you're able to do it, you might no longer notice that it's an issue. So I think a big part of it is identifying those issues that aren't going to be addressed and managing to that based on safety or based on priority. Okay, Tommy, did you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I would add that it's our responsibility as facilities professionals to identify those items, whether they're going to be addressed or not. And I can tell you that, certainly it's been my experience that if you were not to identify them and there was a failure 5 months later, you'd be the first person to be looking for as to why wasn't it identified. So it is absolutely our professional responsibility to identify any deficiencies that we find.
So we have a couple of other questions on the list, and we are a bit over on time. So we'll cover we'll cover just one more, and then any additional inspections. If you contact us, we'll be sure to circulate the answers out to everybody. Or if you have a specific question we weren't able to address, we'll reach out to you directly as long as your contact information is in the question or on the registered list.
Okay, so before we get to one about the webinar, I just have a logistical one. Someone asked if we were going to be sending out the presentation slides. We will be following up with the recording video later this week, so keep an eye out for that. And then the last question that we'll cover today is what's your advice for how to roll out a mobile inspections? Right now they're doing everything on paper.
So I think the biggest thing is to start with an easy win. I think that a lot of people find it daunting, particularly, we've done facilities where they have dozens of inspections going on, and they have, binders of different inspection forms that are being used. And some people wind up sort of pushing off the decision to automate their inspection process because there are so many of them to do. A lot of times, the best thing to do is to bite off a small inspection where you'll get a lot of value. I mentioned one that we did a long time ago. What we did was we installed 20 hard points RFID tags, and there were only 3 things you could pick. So they kept doing a lot of other inspections on paper, and they kept doing them in the way that they were always doing them. But for that one risk management round process, they switched it to mobile. And then by doing that, they built up a skill set or a comfort level with the team doing the inspection. So what ended up happening was instead of them being inundated with, change from doing these 50 inspections on paper to doing these 50 inspections on a mobile device, which was scary to them, if they got to the point where they were doing, 49 inspections the way they were doing them before, and then one inspection was very streamlined, very efficient, very easy, and it saved them time, the team doing the inspections actually, it became a pull process where the people doing the inspections wanted to automate more and more of it, rather than them feeling it was being foisted on them. I think that's really key. I think that if you're looking for a way to roll out mobile inspections in an organization, I think there's a danger of, the perfect being an enemy of the good, in the sense that if you try to automate every single inspection all at once, there's a risk of overwhelming the people trying to adopt the mobile inspections regimen, and it just seems like a daunting amount of work to take on. If you pick the easy win, and you get people using it efficiently and effectively, and work out all the process stuff about the comfort with the device and all the login permissions and how things are triggered from your inspection. If you do that in a relatively easy, small scope inspection and get the entire team comfortable with it, I think what you'll find is the team itself will drive the effort for you rather than it becoming an effort of you trying to push it onto the team doing it. I think that's that's a big thing. And the other thing too is to leverage examples. So, typically, if anything comes up with an incident or an inspection, and all you have are paper records, if it's the person who actually has to dig through banker's boxes of forms to find all of the inspections for a particular valve over the last 10 years, that person is an easy win to get them over to mobile because they're going to love the fact that they can get to that history right away. So I think it's I think the biggest thing is to sort of find the easiest win, find the easiest small scope, high value inspection that you can transition, and then let your team pull more of those processes over rather than trying to do it all at once. So as we're about 7 minutes over, what I'd like to do is wrap up, and what we'll do is we'll collate the rest of the questions that came in, and we'll be sure to have answers available to you guys for those. I want to thank Tommy and Anna for being on the session with us, and I certainly want to thank Trade Press for helping us set up the FastCast. Again, please feel free to reach out if you have additional questions after the session, and we'll get back to you with a copy of the session upon request, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much.